And now moving on, I'd like to introduce Dr. Matthew Kekoa Lau, who is the Assistant Professor of Indigenous Knowledge and Practice at the University of Hawaii, West Oahu. He will discuss E Moana Ka Honua, Edupreneurial Auwai as systemic intervention for community wellness.
E whanua luna e piano lalo e huiana na moku e kuana kapaya. E whanua luna e piano lalo e huiana na moku e kuana kapaya. Aloha mai kako. O Matthew Kekoa Lau koinoa piha no makakilo mai au no Hawai'i mai au o palehua ku mauna o kahe ku kahakai, o hono uli uli, ku pu'u honua, aloha mai. Thank you very much. I'm Matt. Yeah, thank you. Oh, welcome. Yeah, and thank you for, let me bring out my notes. Thank you for letting me begin with that oli. The oli is about change, and very much thank you to all of you because I'm so inspired by the change that I see in all the work that all these great people, all of you are doing, including all the folks online and throughout the world. I've seen a lot of change in my relatively short and hopefully continuing long career in this indigenous space for Native Hawaiians. Real quick, thank you to Mindy and the Minnesota Department of Health Services and the Tamalpais Trust for being so supportive of me and my other colleagues from Hawaii. I also want to recognize all of my colleagues and my friends and family in Hawaii and beyond for supporting this work. Today, I'm going to be, I'm so used to my slides being behind me. Today, I'm going to be talking about, in my title, E Moana Ka Honua, which is about the earth satisfying, the earth being satisfied. It's this idea that through our work, we can address the systemic challenges, the systemic constraints that are facing us in our work to be connected, to be good stewards of the earth through our practice of aloha aina, or our love for our land. Hawaii is, like many of your homes, is at a crossroads. Our food systems are challenged, right? Hawaii imports over 90% of our food and other goods. At minimum, they travel 2,500 miles before they get to Hawaii. On an average, they're traveling something like 5,000 miles. In Hawaii, we have the lowest average income compared to the United States, and food costs are on average 61% higher than other places. We also have higher food insecurity rates. 11.9% of people are food insecure, which is about 1.7% higher than the national average. And this is all going to be magnified by climate change, as I'll talk about in terms of the recent fires that many of our communities have been experiencing. It saddens me to hear about the fires and see the fires in California, in Canada. And that's a direct result of our changing climate. And to address these challenges, we do have an opportunity. We can, through our reconnection with our culture, with our foodways, we can make these changes to address larger issues like climate change, but also issues at scales closer to home in our own communities. Like many of your communities, Hawaii and our people were challenged by a legacy of genocide, colonization, and I'll talk about a little bit of the history of that. And that history has created systemic challenges. Challenges involved in how we produce our food, how we consume our food, like our physical health, our emotional health, our general health and well-being. And these are not equal across all the people in Hawaii. Geospatially and sociopolitically, we have inequalities that we're facing from those historic constraints. And these are limitations often that limit our cultural practices because of the importance of our food and our foodways. Right? And so in summary, what I hope to contribute to all of you, just as I've been getting from all of you, is how we are addressing these impacts through our culturally based revitalization efforts, and how taking that approach allows us to think about systemic challenges. Right? So Hawaiians and many other Pacific Island people that we call our family were great voyagers and expanded their populations throughout the entire Pacific. And with them, they brought their food and their foodways. And Hawaiians were very sophisticated voyagers. They were very sophisticated farmers and fishers as well. And this is a great study that really was inspiring to me to shift my frame of thinking around this. This is a paper by Natalie Kurashima and her colleagues Lucas Fortini and Tamara Tickton at the University of Hawaii. And in a survey of all of the anthropological evidence and ecological evidence, they collected those data and made projections in the past and under climate change. And their estimates were that the Hawaiian agricultural system pre-contact could have supported as many as 1.22 million people in Hawaii. And this paper was very impactful because it actually moved anthropologists to increase the pre-contact population size estimates, something like doubling the population estimates at the point of contact. But one thing I'm inspired by here is that this is a very sophisticated agricultural system that's taking advantage of the immense diversity of climate and regions and different parts of the ecosystem. So at the point of contact, based on Kurashima et al.'s evidence, there were something like 800,000 Native Hawaiians living in Hawaii. After that point, there were, as is shared with many of the indigenous communities throughout the world, there was disease, there was displacement from the land, there was the movement of people into urban areas, and there was a process of colonization that occurred. So this graph is showing that in this land of abundance, right, after colonization, we have a genocide that progresses, and going from that 800,000 potential population around 1776, at the turn of the century, the 19th to the 20th century, there was estimated somewhere between 20 and 40,000 Native Hawaiians. And this process involved in this process is the transition of the agricultural system and the food and the foodways in that system. So I grew up with my grandpa and my family, largely my Hawaiian, but also my Chinese family, eating Spam. I love Spam. I grew up eating Spam and eggs and malasadas, and to me that was Hawaiian food when I was a kid, right? But it's not Hawaiian. Spam, right, like as shared with other communities, this was a food that was given to us or forced upon many of us, or was eaten because that was what we had and that's what we needed to live. But I always say Spam is objectively delicious. And we had a workshop with Nephi Craig on Sunday, and like, I really appreciate the work that Indigenous chefs are doing, because these foods are a part of our story, and they're not something that we can just reject, because they're a part of our history. But one agenda I have is acknowledging and spreading the knowledge that many of these foods are not Hawaiian, right? So I think in Hawaii, because of that history of agricultural shifts, pineapple is very strongly associated with Hawaii and being Hawaiian, but pineapples are not indigenous to Hawaii. They're indigenous to South America. And actually the Hawaiian word for pineapple is hala kahiki, which literally means foreign hala fruit, which I'm now showing. So this is the hala fruit. It's the pandanus or the screw pine, and this was consumed by Native Hawaiians. And to them, they're like, oh, pineapple, that looks like our hala. And so that's what they named it. They named it foreign hala fruit. And that legacy, the progression of genocide in Hawaii, the progression of the political disruption that occurred through the coup in the latter part of the 19th century has really set the stage for the continued loss of culture and health disparities in Hawaii, which are systemically based. Right? So this figure is from the Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander Health Assessment that came out in 2020. The data are from 2015, and these are different non-communicable food-based or food-related diseases: coronary heart disease, stroke, congestive heart failure, cancer, diabetes. And Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders are suffering death or dying from these diseases somewhere between, depending on, pick your disease, somewhere between double or close to 4 times the rates of the rest of the people in Hawaii. So these are systemically based, right? They're from that history, right? They're embedded in the ancestral trauma that we're experiencing. They're also embedded now that we know in our epigenetics, and they're also embedded in the socio-political reality of the people in Hawaii. So I'm going to talk about a couple of examples of that. So these are two maps. This is the island of Oahu, and on your left is the population of Native Hawaiians shown as a percentage, and the redder the value, the higher the Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander population. And on the right, we have the household poverty rates. Also the redder the color, the higher the percentage of poverty. And what we see is that in the regions with the highest Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander populations, we also have the highest rates of poverty. This translates into things like reduced access to healthy food. This is a study from 2017 where some folks went out and surveyed to find what are the food access points in the Wai'anae coast, which is that coast that I was showing you on the map. It's the larger region is the Lualua Valley. So they counted all the different places where you could go and get food: grocery stores, convenience stores, sit-down restaurants, fast food, etc. And they found most of the food access points are they're primarily fast food or convenience stores, right? So 72% of all the places where you could go and get food is either a fast food place or it's a convenience store. The majority of the people, therefore, consume little to no vegetables. So they're actually consuming, the majority of people, greater than 50%, are consuming 1 or no servings of vegetables each day. So they're mostly consuming high-calorie, high-sugar foods, and that, as we know, that's linked to these non-communicable food-related diseases and increased rates of death and mortality from those diseases. Another thing that I think is actually important to mention in here is that there are a lot of commonalities that Native Hawaiians and other Indigenous Pacific Islanders share with Native Americans in North America and Central and South America. There's something that's important that we are, as a part of this truth-telling process, we're starting to speak some truths about what is the actual reality and has been occluded through a process of denationalization. So typically the narrative for the political progression of Hawaii and therefore the political status of Native Hawaiians is that there was a process of colonialism, colonization, and then there was a coup that then destabilized and overthrew the government, progressing through to annexation, territoryhood, and then statehood. And that is the narrative that the majority of people in the communities across the islands and also the officials, the political officials in government, usually have. There is now, thank you very much, there's now substantial evidence that supports a very different narrative, which is that Native Hawaiians and the Hawaiian Kingdom was recognized as a sovereign nation with parity in the Westphalian international legal sense that nations recognized each other as sovereign nations, right? And so the Hawaiian Kingdom, according to a number of scholars, including, and I'll just point to Dr. Keanu Sai, who's at the UH Manoa, that's been doing a lot of this work, that Native Hawaiians actually now exist in a state of occupation, that the Hawaiian Kingdom and the Native Hawaiian people are a sovereign nation that their sovereignty continues to this day. The issue here is that those two conflicting stories are creating this liminal status for Native Hawaiians, that there is this sort of treatment of Native Hawaiians like you are colonized indigenous people without sovereignty, but we don't have a nation-to-nation relationship with the United States, right? And we also internally have this fractured political perspective that's the result of denationalization processes. Right. So the important thing here is that all those things I just talked about are embedded in that historical context, and that that historical context means that the challenges we're facing are rooted in those causal factors, right? Right. So, and the pathway forward is that we need to recognize those historical causal factors, and we need to address them, whether it's policy or knowledge or economy, society, et cetera. So I work both at the University of Hawaii, West Oahu, and at Ma'o Organic Farms. So Ma'o Organic Farms is a social enterprise. It has a larger mission-driven, a not-for-profit, that within that contains a for-profit model business, which is the farm. And the founders of the farm, Gary and Kukui Maunakea IV, are deeply embedded in the Leeward Coast community, and they saw these challenges. 22, actually, they're just celebrating the farm's birthday last weekend. Yeah, that they saw these challenges in their community, and the pathway forward for them was, we have immense strength in our community. How do we empower that? So they looked at educating their youth, improving their health, growing their own food, and practicing a deeply held tenet of aloha aina and as a pathway forward, using that social enterprise entrepreneurial model, but also this education-focused component of the organization. So Ma'o, as I was saying, it's on the western or the leeward side in the Lualua Valley, and the folks at Ma'o, in collaboration with other community members, developed this idea of the Edupreneurial Auwai. So the Auwai is a water, river, stream-based system that was a part of many of the immense agricultural systems throughout Hawaii. So a lot of these systems were organized around what are called ahupua'a, land regions that contain the people and the resources that those people were deeply connected with. So the Auwai is that stream that's running down through that system, and it would feed primarily, the Hawaiians would grow kalo or taro. So taro to Hawaiians, Hawaiians, as anthropological studies suggest, that Hawaiians are unique in their deep dependence and cultivation of taro throughout the Pacific. So the Auwai was their system to have a water-based system that they took water and enriched it with different nutrients and passed it through their lo'i or their kalo growing systems to produce their food. And not just kalo, but fish, other organisms, living organisms in those systems, and the surrounding river systems were heavily curated by Native Hawaiians. So the educational component of Ma'o is based on this idea of, and takes this metaphorically to build this concept of an Auwai for education, where we're enriching and empowering young people. So I won't go through all of this. There's actually quite a lot of work, and this interfaces with a large part of the community in both the educational space the educational space both at academic institutions, but then also in community. So we work a lot with the University of Hawaii, both Leeward Community College and also West Oahu. And in this process, right, going from early in adulthood, working with families through different programs, and then working through youth as they move through high school into college, and that transition, especially from high school to college, is a very leaky point in the educational system in Hawaii. We help to empower them and help them empower themselves and contribute to their communities. So a couple of impacts. One is that because of the estimates of the improved income from increased education, right? So that's the bottom there. As you go up in educational level, you're increasing in a certain percentage of your potential income. We estimate that between 2001 and 2018, that the annual additional earnings from the people coming through the program was over $500,000, and the lifetime earnings of those people, those young people coming through the program, could be high as over $19 million over the course of their lifetimes. We also are feeding the community, and that's a really important thing to, whether they're Native Hawaiian or not, the people in the community are very interested in their community and supporting their family and supporting their friends. So one thing we're really proud of is really energized by the pandemic and the funding from the pandemic. We've partnered with the Wai'anae Coast Comprehensive Health Center and the Elepaio Services program, where they're doing work in the community, providing food distributions directly to community, also doing produce prescription programs and farmers market support. We increased such that from 2019 to 2021, we now send somewhere between 20 and 30% of our product goes directly to community through this program. And I think it's the largest outlet. Yeah, thanks. And thank you to Elepaio Services, who are here. I'm gonna just point, they're right there. Talk to them, they're amazing. They do really great work. The other thing is we're actually seeing direct impacts to people's health, and these are somewhat preliminary data, but looking at the several health metrics, people in the program we're seeing decreased rates from beginning over the course of even just a year, decreased rates of pre-diabetes indicators and diabetes indicators. And yeah, thank you. Yeah. And this research is possible because of our partnership with folks like the Mauna Kea Lab. Also, Alika Mauna Kea is going to be giving a talk tomorrow, and he'll go into much more detail of some of the empirical research that we're partnering with them. And so they're digging into that, and we're finding things like those health impacts are like they're systemic, and that our health system, our health is a part of a system. So they're finding things like self-esteem is related to your diet, and that's related to your gut microbiome and your epigenetic status, particularly indicators of epigenetically based inflammation, right? So I'm just going to close with a few thoughts that I think are important to share in all of this work. Aloha Aina is at the core of what this work is about. So aloha, right? In my introduction, I say aloha mai kako, right? And in Hawaiian, there's two ways to say us, or a plural, right? So when we say kako, we're saying everyone. So not only you that I'm speaking to, I'm saying myself as well, right? And so when we say aloha, it's not, hello doesn't encapsulate it. Love doesn't encapsulate it. Aloha is bringing us all into a space of love and connectivity. So when we say aloha aina, we're talking about connecting in a way to our aina, right? And aina comes from that which feeds us. And so this practice, we're an organic farm. Ma'o stands for Mala'ai Opio, and it is an organic farm. So Mala'ai Opio is youth garden, so we're empowering youth, and the youth are growing food. And we do that organically and certified organically because we have those values of aloha aina, so we wouldn't do it any other way. And now we're starting to partner with the USDA, and they're transitioning to organic program, and we're looking forward to doing a lot of activities growing our organic industry. One thing I wanted to reflect on too, the recent fires that we've been having actually across Hawaii, but in particular, it's on a lot of people's minds, and people are looking at the fires on Maui and Lahaina. And I wanted to say that the roots of this have been very clear, and there have been numerous articles written over the last 5 years that have pointed to the need to be addressing fire and the connections between fire and agricultural practices. And we know from journals from people who came to Hawaii at the point of contact that Hawaiians were already recognizing, had already developed a very sophisticated knowledge of fire, the importance of fire, and the potential to use fire in prescribed ways with agriculture. In all of this, we need to think about systems. We need to see the wholeness of our challenges, and we need to see the wholeness of people, right? These deaths, these numbers, right, are based on real people who are living their lives. And the traditional model, the typical Western model is to approach individuals, and your food choices are what are creating your health reality. But we know that these are systemically based. We know these are embedded in a historical context. So we need to see that person beyond just their individual health choices and food choices. And so one thing that I do with my partners at UH, and particularly in the Sustainable Community Food Systems program, which is what I teach in, is to generate a program that recognizes that and helps young people to take on action-based research to find out what those challenges are, what the historical constraints, what the historical context is, and move forward. One thing I want to say is that my colleagues there have pointed to a need that we're seeing going forward, is that in Hawaii, only 12% of people are actually prepared for disasters. Even though something like 60% of them perceive that they are prepared for disasters. Those people who are aware of the need to prepare, the majority of them actually can't prepare because of the access to food and water and the space to store it. But we're expanding our efforts at Ma'o, and through a program I've been coordinating, which is a USDA-funded program called Project Konohiki. We've been organizing an internship program called the FE'e, or the Farm Expansion Experience, which places interns not just at Ma'o, but at our partnering farms across the island. And this is expanding our work, expanding our community, expanding our aloha aina practices. And the last thing I wanted to end on is that foodways revitalization is delicious. Cultivating our foodways and rediscovering them is delicious. And I just wanted to end by sharing something kind of personal, that I've been away from Hawaii for a long time. I went away to school, and I lived away from my family for quite some time. And in returning, I've reconnected to my family, and one of my aunties, Auntie Rani Ching Pacheco on Kauai, just passed away from congestive heart failure. And she had diabetes. But in that little bit of time I got to spend with her, she shared with me a story of her auntie taking her to the ocean and catching octopus and collecting sea urchin and making her favorite dish, which was raw octopus and sea urchin mixed together. And she told me, Matt, it was so good, it'll make you forget your last name. And I cherish that, because there's so much sadness, there's so much kaumaha in what we do, but there's so much change and empowerment and deliciousness in that as well. So mahalo to all of you.